Hello and welcome to the Free Cheese episode 456. I'm your Joe Dix, joined by Matt Zellner.
Hello.
Mark Augustiniak.
What's up?
Free Cheese is a weekly video game podcast about video games brought to you once a week by thefreecheese.com. This week, Season 10 continues, Episode 21, Tokyo Jungle. We'll be talking all about the 2012 release for the PlayStation 3, ranking it, and enjoying it. But before that, I would like to know, if you woke up dead one day, and you weren't dead, but everybody else was. Follow me, Matt. It's okay. Just stay with me. What city would you want to be trapped in, alone, realizing you're the last person? I asked that really poorly. Basically, if you were in Tokyo Jungle, which jungle would you want to be in?
Good question. For some reason, my mind went to Sweden.
Oh?
I don't know why.
Now, would you want one of the more populated city? Well, I guess it wouldn't be populated. You'd be the population, but would you want more like that or something more small, quaint, quiet?
I'm sure their cities aren't like the cities that we're used to. I feel like all the roads are just brick instead of asphalt. The buildings are more vintage looking and not just a bunch of rectangles. You know what I mean? Like skyscrapers and all that. I think they're probably more like small town, like mountain town village type stuff. That's the vibe I'm getting in my head with a lot of it. I think something like that could be relaxing to see versus like a I Am Legend or Last of Us looking setting.
Yeah, a good change. Matt, what do you think?
I don't know. My mind, when you ask a question like that, my mind goes to survival and the optimum survival area. Honestly, probably somewhere in Japan. I feel like you have water for fishing. In a city, you have plenty of food from the city and all of its city dwellers. You can live amongst many shoeboxes in an apartment. You can go high in a skyscraper to stay away from the crazy. I don't know. And, like, who knows? Maybe electricity's still around for a bit. On the plus side, Japan has cool technology.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, that's fair. You can maybe get a robot dog.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I think, like, my mind went somewhere, like, maybe in Mexico.
Also good answer.
Somewhere, like, I'm thinking somewhere where you don't get full-on winter. Because I think that would be the part, like, summer would suck also, but I think...
Yeah, I was a little shocked when you said Mexico there for that reason, but...
I feel like I could, like, realistically survive longer in heat than I could cold.
Yeah, like
I would be miserable, but...
I feel like for the heat stuff, I think as long as you're able to, like, stay near some type of body of water, because usually we all know beaches are, like, stupidly windy, right?
Yeah.
It's like, you can never put a towel down on your first try. It's like...
Yeah.
So at least if it's a hot day, you could find a breeze somewhere.
Yes, that's true.
Or live in a lighthouse.
Could live in the lighthouse, but that doesn't always end out
seen that
so
movie.
Well. Yeah. Well, 10 years ago, almost to the day, June 7th, 2012, Tokyo Jungle was released. Developed by Crispies, with partnership with Japan Studio, published by Sony Computer Entertainment. And yeah, you play as a Pomeranian in Tokyo. I mean, at least that's the initial idea. So, normally we read the box art on this guy, but there's not really the box art was only released physically in Japan. It did come here, but it came here as part of a collection physically. We got it first on the digital storefront. I do have this looks like a fan-made kind of thing. But basically this says, unleash your inner beast to hunt your way to the top of Tokyo's post-apocalyptic food chain. Whether in story or survival mode, you never know where your next meal will come from or the dangers you'll face, so be prepared for anything and everything. Choose from over 50 animals, uncover the secrets of humanity's extinction, compete in global leaderboards. Tokyo Jungle. I think real quick, if we can, I know this is a little different than our normal approach. Before we jump in to actually talk about the game, I watched a GDC talk with the director of the game and the founder of the studio. His name is Yohei Kataoka, and he talked about how they got to Tokyo Jungle and what led to making Tokyo Jungle. And I thought a couple of the pieces in there were pretty interesting. That I won't go into the whole thing. I think it's worth a watch probably, but things that were interesting about them developing this game. He'd started, he was in college and was doing website design as a way to make money while he was wrapping up college and taking classes to do web design and whatever. And he felt that while it was nice money and whatever, and he's earning a living, he did not love the idea of doing work by somebody else's definition, right? So getting client descriptions of what they wanted was not what he wanted to do. So he thought of doing his own thing and going to make whatever, and he thought that video games would be, he'd played games forever, so it made sense to move into video games as the next thing he did. And at the time, this is in 2006-ish, the PS3 was just about to come out. The PS2 was the dominant console, and the PSP was out. So he and his team, he and a friend really, they kind of formed a small team, and Sony had this thing that they did where you could go and you could kind of pitch a game idea, and if they liked it, they would help fund you or whatever. It was a way to promote small development teams and whatever. So they went there with a pitch deck for a PSP game, a different one for a PS2 game, and a different one for a PS3 game. And Sony liked them a lot, and they ended up doing none of those games and instead made a PSP game that I should have jotted down the name of it, but it was basically a personal stylist game. So it used the iToy camera that you could pop into
Perfect.
the PSP. You would take pictures of your clothes, and then you could organize them all by color and whatever. And then before you go to buy a new piece of clothing, you could then compare it to what's already in your clothing inventory and see would this work with things I already own for outfits and things like that. And that was their first game they put out. They then kind of, to follow that up, had a couple different pitches and different ideas. And they'd gotten to the point where they wanted to make this 2D open world game where you got to adventure, you got to hide underground, you got to go up into the skies. And the feedback from Sony was basically, yeah, there's not really a game here. There's not much to it, and it's too, whatever. So they peeled back. They decided they still wanted to keep the 2D open world part because they thought that was interesting. But they approached it from what are things that are universal that could be loved by anybody, right? Because that's something to get wide appeal. You want to make something that's universally approachable. So they combined animals with the concept of a ghost town, because people love animals, people love ghost towns. Why not multiply those two things together and get something that turns into Tokyo Jungle? And then the last key thing I kind of jotted down from watching this that I thought was pretty wild is, rather than sit down and make a prototype or any of that stuff, they actually, the very first thing they did was make marketing materials for the game. And he said it was kind of like they made a straight up like poster. He said they wanted to make something that looked like it'd be hanging in a train station. I don't know if you guys have seen those big things in New York or whatever, like the big long, but they made it like that format. It was like Tokyo Jungle, and it's the font that you see now in the final release. Tokyo Jungle, the release date, PS3, had their little logo in it, and it just had this like landscape of a Tokyo with overgrowth all over it and animals just kind of wandering. And he said that was for the team like super, not necessarily inspirational, but it was like a driving factor that kept them wanting to move forward on production of the game, because they kept seeing that and they're like, we want to be able to get to a point where we have our poster. The next thing they did, again, before making a game, is they made a fake album art, like of what a soundtrack would look like. So he found this artist who had taken these pictures of just like an empty Japan, and he started drawing in dead animals all over the streets. And that was another thing where they were like, oh yeah, this is the world we want to build. And they started to do that before making the game, and had those things together. And that kind of carried through all the way to the end. Like when they went to go release the game, the feedback they got from marketing was to the box art that marketing wanted was, you know, showing how many animals you could be in the game, because there's over 50 playable animals, put them all on the cover of the thing. And he showed what it looked like in the GDC talk, and it was like this mess, just animals all over the place, and it said Tokyo Jungle. And he said, like, literally like 13 hours before he had to turn in the materials or whatever, he peeled it back and did the one that we know now, which is just a lone Pomeranian in the streets, and it just said Tokyo Jungle. And like that ended up popping up on like Kotaku's best box arts of 2012 and all that kind of stuff. It like pretty neat. But I think that too, like as they got to the end of it, rather than farming out marketing stuff to a marketing department or to a third-party marketing consultant, they did it themselves and felt like it was just, you know, super, like, I don't know, it made them feel more attached to the actual game and more attached to get, like, I think to the finish line of production, like seeing and realizing all those things, like the packaging, the marketing materials, those things help them to like see their vision through. I know that's a little different than we normally start the thing where we talk about our experience with the game, but I just, watching that, it seemed kind of
I like that.
interesting, an interesting approach. Yeah, they like also like I think their pitch video to like get the full funding or whatever from Sony was they went in After Effects and they layered drawings and building drawings, and they just kind of slowly animated things in there without actually coding anything, just to show, you know, how you'd move through the world. And it's funny how much of it ended up in the final game, like the way the deers jump and like the arc of their jump, but that whole thing was their key kind of design idea behind the project of like, you will fight to survive, and you will, depending on the enemy, or rather the animal type that you are, you know, herbivores can clump together and whatever, others can mate to, you know, all those things, all that stuff that's in the final release. It was all kind of in that original pitch deck. Yeah, so to that, Tokyo Jungle releases PS3 June 7th, 2012, comes stateside September 25th, same year. What was the first, when did you first hear about the game, or what was your first exposure to this, Matt?
So this is the old Podcast Beyond favorite. I don't know if you remember that. Well, it's still going on now, but remember back in the day of Colin Moriarty and Greg Miller. And that kind of, in turn, like, I start paying more attention to the PSN, I think, at that point, right? And I could tell you the episode, I can't say the number, but I remember the exact episode I started listening to, like, gaming podcasts, because they were the first ones. And it was when the PlayStation 4 was revealed. I was freaking out. I just wanted someone else's, like, where can I go to hear more? And I kind of fell on that. And then, yeah, kind of from there, I pay more attention to PSN. They start talking about this game. So weird and random, but I think Colin, especially, really talks up, like, this being, like, a hidden gem. It's a hidden gem. I check it out, and, yeah, it's pretty good. And I probably, sometime in college, I'm late. I know I'm late to this game at this point. It's not so brand new, but yeah, I want to say probably somewhere like my junior or senior year. So that would be the 2013, 14, somewhere in there. So yeah, no, around there. But yeah, no, this was, I don't know if it is, but I consider this game a hidden gem because I feel like when I heard about it, or like up until that point where I heard about it, I was like mainstream AAA, Call of Duties, Maddens, all that stuff. I mean, there's your occasional game that I would hear of from word of mouth, but no, it wasn't until super late that I heard about this game. So I just kind of consider this like a hidden gem of the PSN because not your average person, I think, would pick this up.
I think I want to talk more about that in a little bit. Just PlayStation 3 and that generation of those kind of unknown, smaller games that were PSN exclusives. But Mark, what about you? What's the first time you heard of this or thought to look into Tokyo Jungle?
So all this is kind of a blind spot for me. I was never really big in the Sony camp. Grew up in a Nintendo house, and then from there, I think PS2 might have been the most the only real system I've had, other than like I had a PS1 late in the game, like after a PS2, but I never jumped on the PS3, never got it, so I wasn't too familiar with a lot of those games. I feel like I might have seen like an ad for Tokyo Jungle on like a website or something, like game trailers or something like that. It might have been like a banner somewhere, if they had any. Other than that, probably a screen grab in some magazine or something, or it could have been a little clip I saw on G4 at one point, but it was never like on my radar. It was never something that stood out enough to get my full attention to make me want to look into it and try to play it or something. Once I think I knew it was for PS3, and at that point I didn't think about it anymore. I just kind of ignored it because it's like, all right, PS3, not in my realm, not going to be able to play it, not going to think about it. So, but then here and there throughout life and everything, I always either just once every couple of years I'd hear about it. I'm like, oh yeah, Pomeranian, that's weird, cool. Like I always liked what I saw, but I never questioned it. Like, I think for a while I thought it was just a Japan exclusive thing, so I just kind of thought that my chances were just slim to none to even be able to get my hands on it, nor play it, or understand what I'm playing, you know? And then it wasn't until, recently, what was it? When you two played it, probably a couple years ago, that's when it all started to hit me. And I was like, all right, you talked it up. You both are selling me on this super hard. I hate that it took me this long to even play it or get into it, because I really love the idea of it. I like it. So yeah, very, very late to the game.
Are you muted?
Let me try that again now that I'm unmuted. I think that it makes a TM list for sure, right? Like, I think that it's very Mark in that regard. And that brings me to the point I kind of was getting to with Matt is like, I remember buying a PS3 not because there were some factors, right? Yeah, it had a Blu-ray player. It was, one of the next generation of consoles, those things. But it was the exclusives, and it was not just. I tread on this carefully because I really feel like we're in a different spot now when you hear PlayStation talk about its exclusive library, because they're talking about a lot of the games I don't really care about anymore. Like they're talking about God of War and Horizon and those things that are like, they're great and whatever. And yes, they sell PlayStations and they are whatever, but they're not the ones that drew me. Yes, I was like curious that there was a new Twisted Metal in the way, Little Big Planet, etc. back in the PS3 era. But the things for me that literally sold me on a PS3, that I remember the moment, I remember exactly where I was. I was right where you guys will know the spot, right by the mall, where you can turn in. There's the police station on your right and a Burger King on your left. I was in the right turn lane, making a left-hand turn with Dan, who started the podcast with me, telling me about the PS3 and telling me like, dude, you should check it out. Like, there's games you would love, like Flower. And he described Flower to me. And I remember being like, how is that a game? I wanted to see that. And Fat Princess was another one he told me about, where it just sounded so weird and different and whatever. And that was the beginning of it, right? Like PS3 ended up, and PlayStation Network really ended up becoming this kind of, I don't know, really nice space for games that were just different and games that you couldn't get anywhere else. And I feel like PlayStation still tries to lean into that now, but I think that the games are still, I don't know, that's a whole different topic. But I think that of that era, you could not get games like Tokyo Jungle anywhere but the PlayStation Network. I think that they were doing something in that space to really harbor creative ideas. And with that, I think also now we've got a point where, like, I don't know. I felt like back then I could open up PlayStation Network and every week have something just as interesting as Tokyo Jungle pop up, where now it's so oversaturated and every game comes to every platform to maximize profit. And I get it. I understand where all of it is now, but it's like there's just too much everywhere all at once. But this was of an era, and it made me, after the fact, like, I remember hearing about this first from the PlayStation Blogcast, because that was one where they would go, like, obviously it's first party podcast, it's a Sony owned podcast, and they would go through weekly releases and they would do talks with the developers and things like that. They had access to things that not every other podcast did. And I remember them talking about this one, and it just kind of it stood out. It was something different and something weird, and yeah, you don't see stuff like this anymore.
It's bringing up that PS3. Like, I remember wanting it, and the thing that was going to sell me on getting it was, well, first of all, my dreams in my head and imagination mixed with PlayStation Home and what that could have been. That was going to be my biggest selling point to getting that.
Yeah. Honestly, after I had a PS3 and I was chasing platinum trophies and I knew that you could get a trophy room in your PlayStation Home, that was, ooh, buddy.
I saw, didn't they have like a bowling alley or something? Like,
It had a bunch. There was a lot going on there.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like you could actually play it, right? Like with your avatar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, yeah, like It was all that stuff. I was just like, man, I don't even need to play video games. Like, PlayStation just made their own MMO. Like,
I'm the metaverse,
right?
Yeah, they really did.
But then Mitomo happened, and there's no looking back, dude.
No, not for anybody, I suppose. So, Tokyo Jungle, you start off as a Pomeranian. That's the first thing you get to play as. Pomeranian and the Sika deer. Is it Sika deer? Is the first deer you play as?
I believe so.
That sounds right.
And you have a difference between carnivore and herbivore right there, like in your first 2 play sessions with the game. Essentially, playing Tokyo Jungle, you start your entire mission across the board, top to bottom, is to survive, to stay alive as long as possible. There's different objectives that come, on the periphery of that, but generally speaking, stay alive. There's a clock in the top right corner that every minute passing is 1 year within the game. In the top left, you have your kind of hunger meter and your overall life, plus your stamina. So you eat, you fill up that hunger meter so that you're not hungry. As long as you don't get hit, your health stays up. But taking damage or starving will start to tick away at your health. Additionally, there's areas of the map that become toxic or poisonous. And if your toxicity level reaches 100, your health will start to tick down. Stamina drains as you attack or move quickly. So if you're trying to escape an enemy. And there's all sorts of little things peppered in throughout the gameplay that can dictate kind of your overall status. For example, you can get fleas. Did anyone get fleas while they played?
All the time.
Yeah. And fleas make you stop and scratch yourself every now and then. So if you're running from something that is bigger than you and you suddenly have to stop and scratch yourself, chances are you're going to get pawed. Yeah, and that's the overall thing. There's 2 main gameplay modes. There's story mode and survival mode. This is kind of the one thing I didn't like about the game, is that you need to play survival mode to unlock story chapters.
Yeah, it's weird.
But it's not just playing survival mode. You just need to open survival mode, run to one area of the map where there's 3 archive discs, collect them, then a story chapter unlocks. You do the story chapter, and then you have to do another survival mode. And in my experience, you couldn't just my kind of approach was, I will do a run in survival. I'll collect those things along the way. After I die, I'll do another run in survival and get the next one. So I unlock a couple of story chapters in a row, but I was not able to do that. I don't know if you guys had that. I kind of had to complete the story chapter before the next set of archives would, pop in survival.
I can't talk much about that because I am one of the ones that did not finish story mode, and I actually only got to chapter 4, and it's the progression thing that kills me. I know what happens in the story. I know it gets weird and bonkers, and that's it's cool what happens. It almost makes doing this headache worth it. But this is where my problem with the game comes in. It's in survival mode. It's the objectives and how they're laid out and how you must do them. And the completionist in me wants to do everything. And you can't. Yeah. You can't. You either go for the, unlock the next animal challenge, which is usually defeating that animal with the animal you're currently as. You can do the animal you have. There's a whole challenge list, which starts from rank E that goes all the way up to S tier, and they unlock at certain times, which is another problem that I'll talk about in a second. And then or go and get these archive things out in the wild, and usually for example, a lot of objectives, usually when they give you those set of objectives for the animal you are, it comes in sets of 3s. Usually one of them is or at some point one of them is hey, go to area. And it's all the way on the other side of the map and nowhere near the archives. And that gets a little frustrating, especially when you're trying to do it all and you can't. And the reason why you can't is because of the age deadlines to do sets of challenges. And that's the part that kind of bothers me. I wish there wasn't a cap on how long it took or how much your time limit to get these objectives, especially when you're surviving and thriving just fine. I understand dying and not getting it, but it's that and the progression to the objectives. The marking 6 times. I do not like the fact that I just can't mark and take over and move generations twice, which will require marking 8 territories. But then when that objective comes along, I have to do 6 more. And it almost becomes this game of plotting your run by looking at objectives E through A, and then when you do that, you're like, well, shit, I want to unlock the next animal, so I'm not just this deer for forever. So you're like, oh shit, I gotta get the deer in there, and then all of a sudden that has to be done by year 30. But then there's objectives to unlock that objective in the first place that are usually nothing to do or go completely against your current animal's challenges. So I have big problems with the objective thing, but because of that, because of my completionist and how I'm plotting these runs to unlock the next animal, because honestly, I cared more about unlocking the new animals for survival mode than the story. Again, I know the story gets bonkers, but yeah, I had more enjoyment just trying to live and get scores and all that stuff. But that objective system kind of, after a few runs of like trying to unlock the next animal or do something, it just kind of grinds your gears down a little bit, and not my favorite part. But it's a gripe, but it's not the big, like, it doesn't keep me from playing it. It just probably keeps me from playing it for like 4 hours straight.
I'll say I had a similar kind of setback where I was like, man, this, you know what I mean? Like, you kind of had that moment of like, this stinks. But the more I did it, the more I found myself able to easily complete the first set of challenges, the second set of challenges. Like, I was getting better at it the more I did. And you do, it's a strategy. And I hear and I agree with the like kind of, you're lamenting it. But I think I ended up like using it. Like, you do have to think, like I remember knowing I needed to get down to the bottom left of the map, and I intentionally did not mark any territory because I knew that as I swept back up to go to like the Shibuya woods or whatever, that on the way back up I should mark as I go, because by that point I will be in the 10 to 20 year range, aka 10 to 20 minutes, and I can, you know, my objectives are going to dictate that I mark here, mark there, mark, and it does become that. It also, you can look at the map and you can see where there's currently food available. That was another thing of like prioritizing kind of when you ate and how much you ate, which there's a lot of systems to balance when you're just trying to, you know, get through. But I think I'll say that like a decade ago, first playing this game when it came out, I remember just playing and seeing how long I could survive, ignoring all of the challenges. If I got the challenges, it was happenstance, and I didn't even pay attention to them. And I think I had a lot more fun just with the core of the game, just seeing how long I could stay alive versus chase the challenges this time around. But this time I was chasing the challenges, and it did feel a little bit more like a grind and more like, you know, work that I was doing. And my brain was working differently rather than just playing the game. And yeah, again, I really did not love that you had to get the archives in order to open story chapters, and then the story chapters were pretty short, I think, you know, beat for beat, that you kind of like would finish a story chapter and then not get, I don't know. I wanted to kind of do one or the other.
Yeah, like it felt a little backwards
yeah.
with that, because usually in games, story is like the front, like the main thing. But it seems like survival is kind of the main thing, and story is just kind of like a, if you care enough to know about the lore, here's this. It just, but maybe it's just the type of games that I'm used to, or that just seems backwards to me. But admittedly, I was playing Japanese version, so only half the game is in English. So I could not understand the objectives. But I was just sticking to survival.
I wonder if that was better for you.
Yeah, I mean, I was just doing survival and doing what I could, and then realizing that like you get a lot of resources in the very beginning, and then as I was traveling down further into the city, it was starting to get more scarce. And then seeing the time, I think the time is my least favorite feature. It felt very Sims-like, but with consequences, and I wasn't sure how it was going to work, because I think by the time that I died, it was average to how long a dog lives for. So I just assumed that like, oh, once you hit around the 15-year mark or something, like things aren't going to go so well for you. Like I thought it was just like a keep going until time kills you or something like that. But I ran into a potential mate that I did not want to mate, but she liked me, and she had fleas. Now that's why I was avoiding her. I was just like, no. Like, I'm hungry. Yeah. I gotta find food. There's nothing around here. This is not, like, you're not the one.
Yeah, well, they were hungry too, dude.
Right. So now and then, like, I gotta, like, go back up because it was, like, the closest thing to finding food was back up, but it was such a hike that I just didn't make it.
Sometimes,
and it was like,
sometimes you just have the fate to eat, you know?
Right, but just like the pacing of all the items and resources is so weird because it's like you get everything in the beginning when you don't really need it, and then by the time you do need it, it's like miles away for some reason. And I don't know if it's RNG, like if it switches every time you start a new run, or if it's just always like that, where you always start in that beginning part and then you work your way down and then what have you.
It's kind of a metaphor for life, though. You know what I mean? We have everything, and then we don't.
Yeah. But yeah, I think I just ended up dying of like starvation or something like that. But it was getting close to like 20 years or something. So yeah, I didn't fully understand all the game's mechanics. I kept ignoring the map feature. I thought it was just like all right, if you need to look at it, but I was like, all right, but there's a mini map in a corner. Why do I need to go to the big map? Like, there's just no. That was just my.
Told you where the
how
food
my mind
was.
did it. Right,
yeah.
but I'm treating it like it's like it's Grand Theft Auto or something, where it's just like,
yeah,
you can use a big map if you need to make a waypoint, but other than that, you don't really need to look at it. That's just how I approached it. But aside from that, I do like the sneaking. I do like the like right stick dodge mechanic that you can get in there and good. Like do like a counter.
Yeah,
I thought being a deer was super funny. I think I might enjoy the deer more than a Pomeranian. Because, like, you get, like, a cool double jump for, like, no reason. You don't need it.
Yep.
But because you jump high enough as it is. But I just like the idea of the challenge of being an herbivore in a setting like that. And just nibbling on all kinds of plants. And then you just keep going.
I think that was one of those first moments that was like, oh, this game is really special. Because the first thing you do is you're a Pomeranian and you are on the attack, right? Like the game is, yes, throughout every single character you play as, it's about survival, but as a Pomeranian, you're hunting, right? Mm-hmm. And it's very much an offensive game. Whereas the deer, you are on the defense, right? Like you're not defense necessarily, but like it's more about staying hidden, staying with the pack.
Yeah, like you'll die in like 2
exactly,
hits.
Right? Yeah. Oh, yeah, and you're very weak too, right? Where the Pomeranian can kind of fight a little bit, like the deer cannot. And I think that to do that so quickly and kind of reverse and put everything you've just learned, on its head, I think that was a neat approach to building the game. How many times did you die because you were 6 steps away from food?
I don't think it was 6. I think it was more like 600.
There were a couple, like, I remember especially exploring the sewers, like when I would kind of like split to get away from something, duck down into the sewer and then start running, just being so close where I was like, I'm right. Because I'm like wandering, there's no food, there's food, and then drop dead.
Like I did that.
And I really, yeah.
I was going to say, I feel like not dying because of food, but the objectives. I feel like I'm at year 29 and I need to get to Yamamoto line west and I'm in east and 30 comes and I'm like 10 steps away and it's just the big, or you're in that transition period, right? Like you're technically on west, but the game hasn't registered you're in west yet.
Yeah. Yeah, that stinks.
Yeah.
I really liked, there were times where like you have to find this balance when there is no food, for example. You know that the water you're standing in is poisonous, or sometimes the food that you're around is poisonous, but you have to kind of ride the line of poisoning yourself up to a certain point before you reach 100% toxicity and dying of starvation. And it just played more into that whole survival piece. I really the thing I really appreciated too is the overall like arcadiness of this. You have lives, right? But your lives only happen. You start off with one life. You only gain additional lives upon procreating, because you can then use your offspring, or I guess after you procreate, you hand off the generation to the offspring, and then you can like I didn't love that you would sometimes have to like sacrifice another one to stay alive, but it happened. And it does happen, I guess, in nature.
I forgot that was a mechanic,
but I love that they're
until super late in my playthroughs, like leading up to this episode.
Can I just make one quick comment about the mating?
Oh yeah,
like because like it like happens, but it doesn't happen, right? They just kind of stand there for like a second, and then a bunch of mini versions of your character model just appear. I just thought it was funny that like. I know there's a lot of animals you can play as in the game. It's not really a complaint, but I just thought it was just funny that, like, for, like, the Golden Retriever, or the Labrador, whatever that one was, where, like, the puppy version isn't actually a puppy, it's the adult form just shrunken down.
It's so good.
It's so good. I just found it hilarious. I don't know. It's just...
Yeah. But I think that's another thing we haven't talked about yet is the humor in the game that comes out from stuff like that, and just like the overall absurdity of the situation you're in.
Yeah.
I think this game has a lot of that, and I think coupled with the kind of like stark, bleak contrast of this like dead, desolate city where you are just hunting to stay alive or trying to dodge threats. I think that was the humor was like super, super welcomed and fun. But I loved you have lives, you have a leaderboard after you complete a survival run where you get thrown up onto the leaderboard, and the timer I really did like. I know that Matt, you mentioned it works against you, but I do like the general ticking of time and just seeing like an easy measurable mark of progression. Like I made it this long. I
don't think I hate the timer or the years. I just think I hate the timer aspect of it against your objectives.
Yeah, that your challenges are... Yeah, for sure.
It is just a little weird to, like, okay, it took a year to walk a block in the city.
All right, Mark, it's a video game that throws disbelief. It's okay. Also, did you know if you drink twice in a year, you never starve? Like, come on.
I know. It's like some video gamey things I can accept, and then other times it, like, clashes with me. I'm like, wait, what?
I'll have time for 1 year in real time. End game time for my first objective to come up either. I'm glad that
what I would do in that case, I would do I would look to see which area it wanted me to go to as part of that first objective set, and I would just start running there. I wouldn't eat, I wouldn't mark. I would just try and get to there so that as soon as the 1 year clicked over, I would already check that one off the list because I'm there. And then I could start eating, whatever I had to do to get whatever. Yeah.
I usually, depended on kind of a similar thing. If there was a spot where it had me go in like tier E or D, I would go. I would stay in the middle part, but I would purposely go to the opposite end, especially if there was market objectives, and. I would just use that first area to do my marks. And if I needed to change generation there. If not, know that exists if I need to transition back down to do a generation.
Yeah. Yeah, there's strategy that definitely like starts to play out in the map itself. It's a shame that this game didn't get a sequel or anything like that. Because it could have. I think you could like flesh this out even more into.
Speaking of
something
flesh, I like the bone physics. Like you chew on a carcass long enough, it just turns into a pile of bones, and then you just kind of just like ragdoll everywhere.
On the ground.
Like,
yeah, that's super good. There's all those little touches like that. I think are really neat. Yeah. Did either of you mess around with customization? Like adding outfits to your characters?
I'll always forget about it until it's too late.
there's like that tight little vest you could put on the Pomeranian that's just ridiculous.
Yeah, there were a lot of weird little, like, the more you play and the more you find those gifts hidden throughout the city, the more customization options you unlock, and they're just weird.
I love the idea of just these gifts in the middle of this desolate, gritty Tokyo. Mm-hmm. Just these white and red ribbon gifts, especially when you drop out of eating an animal. It's like, oh, you've been hiding a gift in your stomach.
Right.
Not to make oh my god, what's the term? I guess like just not to make connections where there really aren't any, or are there? There's another game with animals that has a white gift box with red ribbon on it. I'm just saying, Animal Crossing.
Oh, yeah.
It's just there's something there. I don't know, but
oh man, that's the sequel we need. The gritty, dark
they
Animal Crossing.
They're all bipedal now.
Yeah, you invite people into your village for survival, not because they're cute and you want them there.
Yeah, not because you want to trade fruit. You want to trade fruit, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, also, like, the dumb humor, like, it makes sense, like, the nail file for, like, a temporary increase of intact, right? But, like, just the idea, again, of just your animal sitting there following their nails, like, in that moment when you need them, like, it's great. But the one aspect of this game, which resonates very well with me, especially because of Dark Souls and stuff, is just, like, what's around the corner. Like, do I dare peek over there?
It does have that vibe.
Yeah.
Like, I love the fact that it keeps to the natural world's food chain correctly. Like, as the Pomeranian, I'm not coming across a lion and winning that fight unless you're a very skilled player.
Not easily.
Yeah, unless you're very skilled, and even then, it's a tough battle.
Yeah,
it almost does something in the natural progression of things where, like, to get to the cool animals, you have to master the game almost, right? Because as a Pomeranian, you're not beating, I think, like a wolf or a terrier unless you're good. But then even on top of that, like, a wolf, while better than a Pomeranian, like, that might be the animal that's required for a hyena or a lion, and, like, that's also tough to take down. So there's, like, this natural progression of getting better at the game to survive, especially with the deer, the herbivores, right? Like you said, that's just it's just defense, and because if I remember, I did not play a lot of herbivores because I was just getting frustrated. It wasn't nearly as fun as a carnivore, but don't you have to, like, take over the territory, the boss territory? Like, you don't have to defeat the boss per se, but you just have to take over the territory. So it's like hide and go seek in that territory, right?
Yeah, it's something like that.
Yeah.
And you herd up more rather than, like, like murder.
Yeah.
Why do you think we haven't seen something like Tokyo Jungle since its release? Or have we? And I'm not thinking. Are there games that have done similar things?
Well, Sony pretty much shut down Studio Japan, so that's one reason.
There aren't really many games quite like this one in terms of play style, but I've seen more games where you just focus on playing as an animal in a like a realistic environment for that animal, like Sheltered or other games like that where
Stray.
Right? I mean, you might as well add that to the list, but like you were saying, like, Tokyo Jungle has, like, this arcadey feel to it, and I do get, like, a FromSoft vibe to it, but if it was in an arcade format, like a more casual, like, maybe not casual, but compared to that game, more casual approach. Because it's, like, it's not really open world, like, you are sectioned off, but you can still explore it, but it's definitely more like side-scrolling than anything. But yeah, I'm gonna say just lack of recognition is probably why we're not seeing much of it, but hopefully it gets its time to resurface, and I think it would exist much better or like now than when it came out. It was probably a little ahead of its time or something like that, just to in terms of a concept, and it's competing against the games that came out around that year. So like, what was it? Just like it was like the years of shooters around that point, right? Where it's just everything, it was like more dark and gritty and serious. And
I think every year is the year of shooters. But yeah, I mean, that was like, that was also the year that The Walking Dead came out, that first one, that the Telltale game. Yeah.
And like indie
So I
games
think
were
we were
like
starting
to kind of be more in the presence, but not quite there, you know?
Yeah.
I
Like
think
from
now,
like Braid and Super Meat Boy, you kind of had those like really big highlights of indie games in the like 2008ish to when this came out. But by the time this came out, I think they were a little bit more accepted among the masses, and they were starting to get more mainstream buzz, right? Like IGN's covering them, GameSpot's covering. Not that they weren't before, but just people are paying attention to them more, I think. Do you think something like Don't Starve scratches the Tokyo Jungle itch? You know, it's a little bit more roguelike, it's a little bit more one-off, but the idea of survival and staying alive and...
the thing with Don't Starve is like the stress stuff kicks in, right? I don't know. I guess this game does have stress management, but I never like thought of it as like a Frostpunk or a Don't Starve or something like that. It's essentially almost the same game, right? But it's, I don't know, it felt different. I never... Yeah, as a, herbivore, like I'm trying to find plants. I'm trying to run to the next area that has enough food for me, right? But I was never like stressing out about where like Frostpunk, like moment to moment, I just feel like any bad decision I make just gonna completely kill that run or whatever.
Like there's a lot of the survival games that we've been exposed to are usually like they have crafting involved and stuff like that.
Right.
Yeah.
And and they want you to do multiple runs. Those are the point of those games. Sure, like they share that common thread, but something about those more crafting survival games feel a little more slower paced. They have like a slower burn to those, where it's just like I don't know. I feel like Don't Starve probably came more out of something more related to probably Minecraft survival mode or something like that, or vice versa. But I think just that whole like unique combat arcadey feeling of like that is what is keeping the momentum forward. I think that's the key there.
I think I would get something. I'm not saying this is the answer, but like I think I would get a closer scratch itch by like a roguelike.
Yeah.
Because I feel like something it kind of has that. I feel more so than the survival stuff, which is, I mean, again, very apparent and it's the name of the mode. But like, there's something where like you are making progress, right? Like every time you do a survival run, you're not necessarily building stats for your character, although you could be unlocking clothes that you can use in future runs. But like, you do the objective to unlock the wolf, and then all of a sudden the wolf is yours, and now you have a different type of run with some different stats, and you just kind of slowly build out until you can get something ridiculous like a tiger or whatever, dinosaurs, and well, hell, robots. Are the robots in the survival, or is it just that just reserved for story?
I think, you eventually unlock to play in survival. There's also paid DLC for this where you can unlock a human.
What?
There's some wild stuff.
Yeah, Matt, I agree. I'm thinking like Rogue Legacy or like Dead Cells or something might be more relatable in a weird way.
Funny,
but like
who I thought of.
But like instead of a skill tree, it's the animals.
Right. Yeah, it's more of like a true rogue. Like, we just talked about the difference of this, and I forgot already. That's going to internally just be a problem.
I think you're right. No, you're.
But it's gonna be more like
right
that,
with
where
the
it's
term.
like a true roguelike does not have an end, right? It's just run based. And I think that this falls a little bit more in that line, of course, because you could survive as many years as the game lets you. I assume it crashes out at some point, but
Yeah. Or maybe it's like Crazy
So-
Taxi.
Oh, yeah, it is, yeah.
Anything to extend that time.
I mentioned before, kind of not this, because I bought PS3 before this game came out, but I bought a PS3 because of games like this. And because of games like this, I've continued to feel validated that I had a PS3. Are there any games that you can think of that made you happy you own a particular console?
I immediately go to GameCube.
Hmm.
I mean, that was like the system where if games were multi-plat, chances are it wouldn't come to Nintendo usually. And if it did, it was usually viewed as the lesser of like out of the three, like PS2 and Xbox, whatever.
Mhm.
But it did have its share of exclusives, and I loved how they would just use the system's limitations in like the best ways, or like what have you. So like those Capcom exclusives that they had on there, like Gotcha Force, definitely was one. Zelda games is like the free spot on a bingo board, so not really worth mentioning that.
Yeah.
What was the other one? It's a port, but all those like Sega Dreamcast games that would get ported over to GameCube. So like Phantasy Star was a big one for me as well. Even though it was on Xbox and what have you, but like it was, for some reason it felt different playing it on GameCube. But yeah, definitely those games are like games where you could like have like the Game Boy Advance functionality with it, like that type of stuff you couldn't get on any other platform is what I liked.
Matt, what about you?
I don't know. I don't think I've ever had like that one game that I'm like, oh man, glad I have PlayStation 2 for that, right? But it was always a collection, and it's always been a collection thing for me. Like, to buy a console, I want a collection to come into, right? Or I get, and it works the opposite way around. Like, I guess like I appreciate having a console once like that. Like, I see the collection that I've amassed, right? Like another game around this era is like Journey, right? Journey, so good, but I don't think like I can point at that one and be like, man, that's probably the one game on PS3 that I'm sure glad I had that console for. I don't think I can ever see myself saying that over like one game.
No, but yeah, I mean, Journey was another one for PS3 that was like, oh yeah, And I think, Tokyo Jungle didn't get a full Vita port. They put out Tokyo Jungle Mobile that had more of a grid-based system to its combat, but I think like this was bundled with Fat Princess, Sound Shapes, and a game called When Vikings Attack on PS3. But like Sound Shapes was another big one where for the Vita, I felt like this is why I love the Vita, right? Like something like Sound Shapes was just so cool, where I remember making like all these weird little levels with my own songs and my own platforming. Like all that stuff was really neat. And just I remember I spent an entire bus trip to New York just like making a song and a level and a stage, and like it still like rings out in my head. Super cool. Yeah, so Crispies, let me try that one more time. Crispies was the developer of this. And yeah, it made 3 games. My Stylish for the PSP, Tokyo Jungle, and a game called Short Piece Renko Tsukigime's Longest Day, which is tied into a Short Piece manga or anime. Co-developed by Grasshopper Manufacture and Crispies as a special game component of the Short Piece anime anthology film. Directed by Crispies founder Yohei Kataoka and written by Suda51. But that's the last thing listed under the Crispies development, and that was 2014. So, and I tried digging in this episode, and I could not find anything. So, listeners, if you know what happened, podcast@thefreecheese.com, but I couldn't really find a solid answer for what the studio is up to, or like their website's still live, their Twitter account's still live, just hasn't really been touched in like 6 years. Even the developer or that main director has an active Twitter, but not really updating anything, which is a shame. He popped up in, weirdly enough, there was an Archipel documentary with Koji Igarashi, talking about just his. Gosh, it's been so long since I watched it. But there's a thing in there where he goes out to dinner with this guy. But other than that, yeah, I don't know. I guess that brings us to the rank. I guess, are there any final thoughts or?
Yeah. I think, like, to kind of echo what I said earlier, I do think it was a little ahead of its time. And I know that, like, this was a good reason to have a PS3. To just have, like, one of those, like, exclusive things. But I think in a world now where, like, things aren't necessarily tied to one system or for long, I think this game could thrive a second time around if it was on something like Steam. I think if it seems like the perfect platform for a game like this, and then once people start swarming in and seeing that, I feel that could bloom a decent sequel or something like that. Like, I feel like it could still have a fighting chance.
Yeah,
that's how much I believe.
Maybe PlayStation Now. Maybe that'll kick off and people will discover this and play it, and
yeah, and that's, if they feel like paying for a subscription to that or whatever.
Yeah,
I am quite scared that if we ever see this game again, like a follow-up to this, it would be a free-to-play battle royale.
I don't hate that. I'm not gonna lie.
I know, but the free-to-play part,
it can be done
and
right.
the pay-to-win aspect, like, alright, like, I'm a Pomeranian, and I'm getting dropped in with the guy who bought the Panther. Like, cool.
Or just have it to where, like, you just evolve in the game. You just switch animals over time. Just work up the chain.
Yeah, it's not even Tokyo Jungle. It's not even Generations. It's evolution. You've evolved to.
Hell yeah! See, look at that. We're building the sequel right now. Sorry.
Well, any plans Krispies had, they probably just threw them out the window. Like, God damn it! Back to the drawing board.
Yeah, I'll link to this in the show notes. But yeah, 2019 is when that video with Igarashi hit, and he's out having drinks, talking with Kataoka. So I don't know what they're up to, but this game is super cool, and I'm super grateful that it was on the list this year. We got to revisit it.
Glad I got to play it finally.
Now we rank it. Yeah, me too. This is one of those ones on the list where I'm like, yes, good. I'm happy more people get to interact and touch it, and yeah. Ugh. I don't know where it goes.
I can start us off.
Yeah.
I think it's in the top 10.
Shit.
All right. I think it's an easy.
Rank this. I don't
like.
I don't know what just happened.
You know why? I'm gonna be honest though. Not that I forgot that we had to rank it, because I knew that, but it doesn't feel like something we should rank. Like, it feels blasphemous to rank this, but we're gonna do it anyway.
Yeah, you have to. I don't know why.
I mean, like, despite the shortcomings I had with it, or just some things, what have you, I think a lot of that I can look past. like nothing about it really deters me. Like I don't find anything too offensive about it. I think like it does have a weird. I guess it's not weird, but like there's a teeny bit of a learning curve, and it does ask for you to like invest some time into it to get to know it better, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But if I'm to think about a game, obviously impulse thought is going to be just how did the gameplay feel, despite the functions or features like that. That's the first thing I think about at least before looking at everything else, and like. I think it has a good, solid gameplay mechanic. I like the temporary like stealth that you can do, or like the way that the combat works, and you're working with the counters, and like depending on the animal you are, it's like it's you have to approach it differently almost every time. For me, this is probably I'm between places 4 through 6.
He didn't help me at all.
Maybe even third, just because I'm different about Rez compared to everyone else.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I'm right there where I kind of want to put this above Rez, and then I look at it and I'm like, well, I like this over Portal 2, and then I look at Wii Sports even, and I'm like, I kind of like this over Wii Sports.
I love its concept.
I do think
Wii Sports
concept. Yeah, I think on the whole, I think the story mode progression. I think some of those things knock it back down. But
yeah, it's like for me the challenge was like for some reason No Mercy felt like the gatekeeper this time around. I don't know why.
Yeah,
like should it go above that or should it go below that? Like. Or should it go above Burnout? Like that's where I'm questioning things. It goes above Beautiful Joe, no question.
I put it above Burnout, and
I mean Sugar Cult. I don't know. That's a tough act to follow.
Fair.
Yeah, but you have
fair.
the DJ that cuts
but
you
I would
off,
even
so don't worry about that. That negates that.
I would even put this above No Mercy. I think No Mercy is high on our list because No Mercy is the best example of a wrestling game, and I think that everything it does really well. But in terms of longevity, I could play No Mercy for a while, I can play this endlessly. Like, this is something where I think every time is different and every interaction is going to be different enough where I would. And I think it kind of complements Downwell in that sense, in that kind of
this might
every
be
run is different. But
there's comparisons right here, I guess.
And that's the tough part. Like, does this edge over Downwell for me?
So yeah, that's all right. I see.
I
Your
think Downwell,
and I
think Downwell still has a solid like
Downwell's the new gatekeeper
foundation and a through line. Yeah.
Yeah, like Downwell just cuts all the fat and just gets right to the point. It's not throwing you.
It's just a solid.
It's not it's not throwing you through two different loops of like similar things. It's just here you go, boom. But not that that's bad necessarily in Tokyo Jungle. Like Tokyo Jungle has a lot. I feel like has a lot more to offer as well.
But they both have those kind of like complementary systems, right? Like remember, the more you got into Downwell, the more that each thing worked. Like everything served multiple purposes, and Tokyo Jungle has that as well with these like kind of interlaced.
I feel this might sound dumb, but I think 3D games, though they might be more appealing visually, they come with more problems technically. Mm-hmm. Is that fair to say?
For sure.
And I feel like if we're to compare, I think on a technical standpoint, Downwell objectively might be just have its. I think it holds it together a little more decently. Like it can. Yeah. Might have a better head on its shoulders because of its limitations. But man, but just being a dog, just being a little dog, just running through shit and like killing birds and like there's
it's pretty good. Clean kill.
Yeah, like I love the simplicity of Downwell, but I love the visuals of Tokyo Jungle. And like I think in my heart of hearts, I think I would want to play Tokyo Jungle again.
Yeah, I agree. Does this go above Res, though?
It would for me, but that's me. I'm okay if it doesn't.
I also feel like if I'm going above Res, I'm going above Portal 2, and you guys aren't going to want to do that. So
we would have to probably talk for another 30 minutes if you want.
Yeah. I feel good about this sitting between Res and Downwell, but Matt, you've been quiet. Where are you at?
Oh, I just didn't get involved in the Downwell conversation because I played that on the wrong platform. My 3 on the website looks harsh. I do believe I would have given that a proper score had I not played on touch controls around like a 4.5 or whatever. I think Downwell just it's tight. It's Tokyo Jungle's not. Like there's fundamental problems with the progression system. Also, I usually pour myself a cup of coffee or get myself a drink in the first minute of Tokyo Jungle runs because I have to wait a minute for a goddamn objective. I know that's harsh, but Downwell, I'm in the thick of it as soon as I drop down that well.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, but there's no like permanent progress either.
I don't necessarily need that.
I mean, yeah, at that point, I guess it's just like a preference, but like, at least with Tokyo Jungle, I feel like I am working towards something that I just get to have. I don't have to keep re-earning it. And I think that's like...
You do get the palette unlocks in Downwell.
Right.
You got the mode unlocks too, though. Like, you could easily unlock something that benefits your playstyle better. Yeah,
there are like the different characters.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So again, there are like pros and cons, though. I don't think you're working towards one. I think you just might end up running into one that works better for you the way you play. But now sorry, hit my computer. I don't think this goes above Downwell, in my opinion. If we're putting it above Downwell, the Res Infinite I don't see that. Because Res Infinite, like, I could easily just fall back into that and start trying to grind out high scores for that Platinum Trophy again and fall back in love with it now that I've been away from stage 5 or 6, whatever that long one was.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I will say Tokyo Jungle, I had all the momentum for this earlier when I was playing it, but, like, towards the end of the week, I just did not want to do the grind again, like to get to, not to like get to like to see if I can complete a set of objectives. I just didn't feel like getting through like that first 10 minutes almost. I don't know, that's a bad thing or whatever. Yeah. But I don't know. I did lose my momentum for the game as I was playing it in batches. I think I pick up and play, do a run here, do a run there, serves this game much better than how I was attempted to play it earlier in the week. But yeah, I don't know. My opinion, Downwell goes above it. I do kind of agree. I think it does go above No Mercy. I do agree with that. I know it was kind of silent there, but I think it does go above there.
No, I agree. I think Downwell still makes sense above it. Downwell's a tighter experience, and I think Downwell you can equally return to the same way you can with Tokyo Jungle. Yeah.
I don't think so, by the way. I think it's tougher to get back into Tokyo Jungle. I forgot buttons. Bad. I know it's easy. I don't know. You can kind of relearn it, but I forgot buttons. Bad from when I last played it.
It's not like trying to learn a fighting game. So
fair.
That.
Yeah, you're not doing Hadoukens with a Pomeranian. Although that would be entertaining as hell.
Dude.
Yeah.
I'm duking.
Do we have a fighting game on the list this year? I don't know.
I don't. Yeah, I don't think so.
I can't believe it.
Unless you count. Never mind.
Well, I'm not.
Say it.
Yeah.
I'm not putting one on
Well,
there.
Unless you count a specific racing game as a fighting game.
Oh, yeah, right. Maybe we've got a fighting game next week, or maybe we don't. You can come back and find out. No, it's not. We're going to tell you right now. Next week we'll be ranking and talking about NBA hang time, just in time for the NBA Finals. But until then, thank you, Crispies, for making Tokyo Jungle. I hope you make more Tokyo Jungle.
That's a good
Or
name.
just other games. I'm curious to see what other ideas come from that team or could come from that team. And I guess that weird PlayStation Plus Extra Plus tier drops soon, and you can get PlayStation Now, even though it's not called that anymore. And you can try out Tokyo Jungle for yourself if you don't currently have a PS3. But if you have a PS3, just buy it. Or buy the disc and pop it in, or whatever you can do. Tokyo Jungle's pretty good. And to that, we'll call it. We'll be back next week. Till then, thank you, Matt. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, listener, for listening. Goodbye.